Welcome to the Balancing Ambitions podcast. I'm your host, Kim Menapace. You are not alone in your pursuit to balance family life, work, side hustles, and taking care of yourself. Balance is not easy to achieve by any means, but we can all work to get better at it together by sharing our stories, tips, and wisdom. Let's dive into this week's episode. All right, we have Dave Menapace back to the show for Balancing Ambitions this week. We're going to talk about our parenting journey, especially with our son Logan, and what we've been experiencing the last 9 months, because I think there's been a lot of growth with our son and then with us as parents. So I'll give a little bit of background and paint the history so that we can bring you up to speed to present day. So we have a almost 6-year-old son Logan and a 3-year-old daughter Brooke. And what we were experiencing about 9 months ago, when we had a bit of travel, Logan had a lot of transitions going on with his class moving on to kindergarten, and he wasn't moving on. We were going into summer and transitions where there was field trips now with his school day, not just 5 days in a classroom. We were just having a lot bigger emotions, and we've dealt with big emotions for years. We just didn't realize that because we thought this was normal. It's our first child. We just dug our heels into materials and books to muscle through it and try to show up as the best parents we could be, because you think you're just going to know what to do in the moment, but you don't. You have to actively seek out material and learn the skill, just like anything else in life, if you want to do it well or you want to do it differently than how you were raised, because how you were raised gives you these knee-jerk reactions and this kind of wiring in you of how you respond to challenges, emotional outburst, regulation, all those things. And if you don't love the handbook that you've been hardwired with, you need to really actively work to change that handbook so you react differently and have different outcomes with certain people, because we can't parent our daughter Brooke the same way we do with Logan, and we've learned that. There's a lot of similarities, but we also learn how there needs to be a different approach and touch with each of them, which has been interesting for us. So back about 9 months ago, we were having a lot bigger emotions and tougher transitions, tougher boundaries. And in talking with school and also friends, we were entertaining doing a neuropsych eval for our son. And for those who aren't familiar, I'm going to do my best to explain it in layman's terms, but series of tests to see if there's anything going on. Is your child on the autism spectrum? Do they have anxiety or ADHD or sensory processing disorder? And so there's just a few hours of testing of various forms with, puzzles and conversations and reading a book and asking them to recall the details of the book. And we had been entertaining doing this for a while, but one of the things that can be challenging with this testing is it can be cost prohibitive. I heard quotes of $3,500 for this testing. You have to decide, I think I need this. Maybe I don't really need it. Or is it worth it? What if I pay that and then there isn't a diagnosis? There's a big barrier and it can be a little vague. You don't know exactly what the cost is going to be once you engage with it. So that's one challenge. And then the other, it can be wait lists and the process to engage and do the intake form, then an intake meeting, then the actual testing can also take several months too. So you almost need to do it before you're at a ledge, because you're going to have a few months before you actually may have some answers too. So back in 2024, in May and June, we did start the process after talking with a friend whose daughter had done a neuropsych eval years earlier. And she told me two things. One, she wished she had done it earlier. And two, she would have paid double to get the results because they were that valuable and impactful and really pivoted the whole way they parented and their understanding of it. So with that in mind and armed with that information, I said, finally, let's go do it. So that meant over the summer, we did intake forms and explained why we were seeking this out. And then we had testing at the end of the summer. And then just before the school year, in early September, I guess the beginning of the school year, we found out our son had anxiety and ADHD. And it was definitely a mix of emotions for me. I definitely want Dave to jump in here, but I think that it was validating and helping verbalize or give a label. Not that I love labels, but I think that's just for lack of better term here, to get some sort of explanation about what we were experiencing and why it may be not that you can compare from any parent and relationship and kid relationship to another, but maybe why we're quote unquote having maybe a little harder time with our son and our toolkit than others may be having. And I think that it also was. You can have these emotions where you're kind of like, why me? Or why, well, how do we handle this? Why, well, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for Logan? And how do we help him? And what other challenges are going to be teed up for school, for beyond school? I just thinking about your child having any additional friction in life when it's already can be like it can just be hard sometimes, and you don't want them to have any more challenges or friction than others, but every kid's going to have their own journey and their own challenges and obstacles to overcome. So I'll pause there and then we'll talk about what we've sought out for treatment since then with behavioral therapy and psychiatry. So Dave, anything you want to
Yeah.
add?
Yeah, I'll also share it was definitely validating. It wasn't a surprise just because what he has runs in both of our families at some level. Uh there was definitely the why me, like why like, oh man, it sometimes feels like the act of parenting is a bigger challenge for us than for other parents or whatever it might be. The biggest learning that came from it, though, that continues to come from it, not necessarily at the time of diagnosis, but more of a reflection and realization later, is that, the playbook for working with Logan is different than some of the other more easily obtainable education around parenting that's out there, things to subscribe to. And the other thing that was a realization. I don't think this is different from any parent. It's just more of a being a realization of being a parent is that I've found that like the needs of our kids are always going to be about a step ahead of the education that at least that I have. And the reason for that is first you have to be able to identify their need sometimes before you can accommodate that need. Not always, but like that seems to happen a lot. Their needs change very, very quickly. And that like I had to give myself some grace and I had to give our kids grace as well and understand this isn't a child problem. This is a problem with me not understanding their needs. And I can't take that out on them and I shouldn't take it out on myself either. It just is. And so I think the big sort of theme that you and I have really been recognizing is almost like your ability to just sit in discomfort, and yes, that can happen with clients, it can happen with kids, it can happen with your partner, but being able to sit in discomfort in a graceful manner has been huge, and it's allowed, I think, at least for me, to get the space to then upskill as a parent as needed.
I think that's such a good point. And some examples of this last week were around the television. Logan wasn't happy. He couldn't have TV. He didn't have the remote. And we had to hold the boundary firmly, but also be okay with his reaction and emotional outburst. That was normal, just kind of crying, yelling, not anything, unsafe or anything by any means, but our ability to withstand that with grace and poise and peace of mind and being a sturdy leader for him was important. And he has to have his own journey to work through those emotions. Your job is not to shut down the emotions. And I think we're all, as if you're a millennial parent right now, I think we're all reparenting ourselves to not do that for ourselves or turn off anything uncomfortable to us, whether it's sadness or anger, and to be able to allow those to breathe. And that's what we need for Logan, is to allow him to let those emotions out in appropriate ways. And so, one of the phrases I love from Dr. Becky Kennedy is, all emotions are allowed, not all behaviors are allowed. And
Hmm.
that mean, and even keeping it in very simple terms, you're allowed to, cry. You're not allowed to hit your sister. You're allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. You're allowed to go, punch your pillow. You're not allowed to kick the door. You just leaving it very black and white in simple terms, I think has also been challenging to say things very simply. I think can be easy to be very verbose. It can be very hard to be very concise in general, even if you're writing a business memo, never mind trying to parent through big emotional moments like that. I think another big thing for me with this diagnosis was even just understanding anxiety and what it means and how it feels to a person. And so one of the big takeaways I had was understanding anxiety is your internal alarm system. And his internal alarm system gets triggered more frequently and for longer periods of time than me. And so, and that means fight or flight, that means threat. So when we paint a room a different color, or even we had a restaurant in town, Bertucci's closed down, and he was concerned asking about it because he heard people talking about it at school. There's not a lot of restaurants in our small town, and he was looked very concerned asking me why the Bertucci's had closed down the street. And I have to explain why businesses go out of business sometimes and why things close. And he thinks, oh, well, they're just going to open tomorrow, right? I said, no, they're not. The sign's taken down. It's probably going to get replaced with a different restaurant. And I could just see the worry and concern on his face. And so that internal alarm system of change equals threat, and I'm threatened and I'm in fight or flight, even mildly with the worry and concern, or more majorly where they're screaming and outburst and he's just seeing red, and you just know that you can't reason with him or communicate with him. You just have to be with him and let him, calm himself down by being that sturdy rock for him in those moments. So I think that's been a big awareness too for me, is just understanding anxiety in general, and you can't reason and logic your way through it. So I think about examples of things I am anxious about. Like, I never want to go bungee jumping. That's never been something I've been interested in. I'm like, what if the rope snaps? I don't like being upside down. I'm falling off a cliff. We've had friends do it on their honeymoons and stuff. And so I think if Logan is anxious about getting a haircut, he's feeling the same emotions as if someone says, you have to go do bungee jumping right now in 30 minutes. And I start having that panic and, fear and no, I don't want to do it. And he's having that about things that are everyday things, which seem very mundane and normal to us. But helping him through those things, when you have that lens, can just be a lot more helpful, can be very inconvenient. I've learned that parenting can be very inconvenient, and things that
Hmm.
could take 20 minutes or do take 20 minutes for someone else can take 2 hours for us, or could take weeks for us to get a successful haircut with him, because we need to handle lightly and have more TLC with our interactions with him.
Totally. Yeah, and it's interesting because my natural, state is more of just like jamming something forward until we get it over the finish line. And yeah, it's interesting, this really is all connected with even like the last episode we just did on entrepreneurship and business and clients and your outer world's a reflection of what's happening in your mind. It really is, right? And I think the I think I said this last summer. I said, Logan is here to teach me patience, which is something that I can become fairly impatient at times. And, I think that's also probably what led to my no time on my calendar because I'd be impatient. I just want to do things now. But the more that I know we've like slowed it down, we've sought education, we've sought help, we've focused truly on leveling up as parents and being there for our kids, the calmer our world in general has been. And it's not that Logan's, on meds now or better now, and that's why it's calm. It's like we're bringing that calmness, that education, that confidence to being parents, and then also to being a married couple at the same time, because that can get lost in all of this as well. And so creating space so there can be intentional focus on those things has then resulted in everybody feeling better, from our kids to us to the teachers at the school. It's been really, really interesting seeing the interconnection of all of this, regardless of the diagnosis of one of your kids.
Totally. I 1,000% agree. And I know we've talked a lot about Logan in this episode, and we'll definitely talk about Brooke, but also bring up a couple examples just to show the difference between how they process the same stimuli. So, two big moments that stood out to me with this diagnosis in mind were being at the dentist with Brooke. And they had separate appointments this week. I think one of them was sick, probably. And so they had to get separated. And I brought Brooke to get her cleaning. And at the dentist, they have those little machines like when you leave a grocery store with the little bubbles inside with a toy and you put a coin in. And so they have a little coin with a smiling tooth on it. And Brooke put it in and got one of the little bubbles and got a toy and said, "Hey, I want another one." And I said, "Oh, we'll get one next time we come. You only get one per visit. So at your next cleaning, you'll get another one." And she just paused and said, "Okay," and then walked away to the door. Whereas with Logan, in that exact same instance, he'd be upset with the toy he got. He'd want another one. He'd start yelling and kicking and screaming in that office. And so it was this big aha moment for me, realizing I was bracing for that meltdown, which again, I'm learning that meltdowns are a fight or flight response. So what if I think, oh, not Logan's having a meltdown or he is having a hard time? That's a big thing we say in our house is Logan's having a hard time, not Logan's, giving us a hard time. And so that was just a very poignant moment for me. And then the other one was even last week, we were at the library and we built this huge tower with magnet tiles. And Brooke opened the bottom of it like a door for a house to put one of the doll house toys inside of the house. And the whole tower collapsed. And this thing was a foot over her head. It was very tall. And we both just froze. And I waited for her reaction. And she just laughs and says, "Ha ha ha. Oh, that scared me," because it just was loud and noisy and messy. And they just sprawled all over the multi-purpose room in the library. And so I said, "Oh, yeah, that scared me too. Let's put these away. We have to head out soon and go have dinner at home with Daddy and Logan." And she said, "Okay." Whereas with Logan, that type of moment has happened countless times when a tower gets knocked over or partially broken and he just gets very, very upset by it. So it's interesting almost being hardwired for bigger reactions. And then when we see a more neurotypical reaction, we're like, "Oh, wow, and this is interesting." And I think I love together time with all four of us, but we also find such value in separate time and one on one time with the kids for a number of reasons to build that one on one connection with each combination of people here. And then also just to give Brooke the different, she's 3, so she still has needs to go through the same phases that Logan had for processing emotions. We still have big tears and reactions and that are very normal for her age, but she still has to work through those as a normal 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. So that's been very enlightening for me to just see different reactions to for different neuroprocessing, and then just also allowing space to have those one-on-one moments and times and outings with each other so that each kid gets that attention that they deserve.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to chalk it up and say like, oh, Brooke can be easier at times, but like her needs are just different. They're not easier or harder, they just are. And one thing that I'm so appreciative of is A, that we have one boy, one girl. It's really fun getting the different spectrums of needs and like things that enjoy them and like that they I'm sorry, things that they enjoy, interests, activities, and um it's neat having them be close in age, but also like still a couple of years apart. And, just they can play together and have fun. At the same time, we can separate them and do different activities. It's really cool and really, really interesting.
All right, I do want to respect your time because I know you have a hard stop. So we'll go into more detail around what we did post report. And I think that first I froze and did not do anything because I needed time to process. And then I over functioned and reached out to too many places that I had trouble tracking who I'd reached out to and who had gotten back to me and who hadn't. So I think that that's also very normal for parents as they try to do the best they can and over respond to things and really be on top of stuff. We're happy with the services we're getting right now. We've done behavioral therapy with Logan and have a child psychiatrist we're working with as well. And I think that the big thesis here has been the behavioral therapy's been with us every single time and with Logan half the time. So we as the caregivers are the most important teachers in our kids' lives. And we've had 20 sessions with the behavioral therapist with us, and then 10 with Logan, which comes to tell you that parents are a huge, huge, huge part of their journey and helping support, especially a neurodivergent child, but any child. And that's been a really cool learning for us. And we'll love to share more about even the mindfulness and meditation and values work we've done that dovetails with our personal development work we've done completely outside of this with real estate and entrepreneurship, and just seeing a lot of connections and synergies there has been really cool. So with that, I'll leave you. Thank you for joining me again, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. And to our listeners, have a beautiful day. As always, if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review, because when you leave a review or share an episode, you make it easier for someone else to find us and benefit from these stories and tips we share. There is a link to everything we talked about in the show notes. Thank you all for listening to the Balancing Ambitions podcast, and have a beautiful day.